Stossel.
America has 50 states. That can be bad, confusing. Each has its own rules and taxes, but it's also good because it creates competition. When one state does something stupid, people can leave that state and take their talent and money with them. And move they do. Between 1995 and 2010, 43 million people moved from one state to another. So which states were the winners? Which were the losers? Let's ask Travis Brown, who tracked the movement for his book, How Money Walks. And he also created a clever way to see who's moving where and why. Darcy Olsen also joins us. She runs a think tank in America's #2 state in terms of gaining people and wealth. But Travis, you first. So explain this cool new thing that you created.
Well, thanks to the IRS, we can track everyone's income moved between the states over the last 15 years. We see big losses from states like New York.
Yeah, now you've pressed New York, my state, and hey, I see people are leaving for Florida and lots of California even, but they're coming in from Michigan at least.
Well, there's not the kind of in-migration you'd want to see, but for a state like Florida, you're seeing a massive amount of people and their income coming in, $86 billion.
Florida was the #1 gainer.
That's right.
Darcy, you run the Goldwater Institute, an Arizona think tank. Arizona is the #2 state. And people come in from Minnesota, my state, New York. But you could say they go to Arizona and Florida just because it's warm. They're moving for weather.
But you'd be wrong.
But they are moving for weather. You're not totally wrong.
Well, the #1 reason people move, and the Census Bureau asks, and they say to find a job. And jobs correlate with low taxes, right? Those go hand in hand. Climate makes up about 5% of people's decisions. It's a small quality of life factor, not the big factor everybody thinks it is.
And John, we see that in the data. There are states without an income tax doing very well in this analysis. States like Wyoming, states like Washington State, all gaining people and income.
So it's not just the weather. What are the highlights? What are the main things you learn?
Well, out of all 50 states, there are 9 that put a price of work at 0. That makes them very competitive compared to a basket of other states that have a high price on work.
What does price of work mean?
The state income tax puts a price on work that's different between one state or another.
So you have this by non-income tax states.
That's right.
Press that button once.
Well, it shows the big analysis for states like Texas who gained $22 billion in the last 15 years, that those states like them gained $146 billion, whereas the reverse, the states with the highest personal income tax rate, lost over $120 billion.
And the top states, Florida, Arizona, Texas, North Carolina, Nevada. The biggest losers, New York, California, Illinois, New Jersey, and Ohio. And taxes, really?
No, I think there's what I call the magic formula, and it's taxes on the one hand and good labor policy on the other, which means to a business being free to hire and fire the people you want. So what you'll see in an overlap in the most successful states, you'll see both no income tax or very low taxes coupled with right to work laws. Hand in hand, hands down, those states will succeed every time. John, it's not so much that people think, oh, there's no income tax there. I mean, a few people do. If you're really wealthy, you think about that. Most Americans think, where are the jobs? Where is the opportunity? And that's what we know goes hand in hand with these good tax policies. That's why these tax policies and the labor policies are so critical for policymakers to get right.
And Travis, you've noticed that states seem to be doubling down on both good and bad policies?
That's right. You've got states like Minnesota that have been talking about a snowbird tax, raising marginal tax rates. Up here, you have those kinds of states not doing as well.
Governor Dayton says, hey, these people are going to Florida and Arizona in the winter, but they're Minnesota people. We should get a little penalty for that. And I can see the thinking.
If the disposable income was truly captive within your zip code, within your city, that might work. But what we know about career mobility today, now more than ever, is that people can and do move, and they do pursue those jobs and where their income is most welcome.
And the states keep raising these taxes thinking they'll get more money, and they get less. They never learn.
That shouldn't be a surprise, considering the past performance of what 134 million taxpayers keep saying with this analysis.
Now, one state that Travis says is moving in the right direction is Oklahoma. It hasn't done that well in the past, but now it's lowered its taxes several times, and presto, people start to move to Oklahoma. T.W. Shannon's the Speaker of the House there. So, T.W., Oklahoma, I think of the Dust Bowl. Why do people want to move to Oklahoma?
Well, you know, John, it's simple. In Oklahoma, we know that if you want more of something, you don't tax it, you tax it less. If you want less of something, you tax it more. And so we're moving to reduce our state income tax rate. It's at 5%, 5.25% now, and we're looking to take it to 4.89. And every time we've done it in the past, we've seen increased revenues and we've seen growth. So we're trying to keep the momentum going in Oklahoma.
And even the usually clueless mainstream media seems to start to get this. Time magazine had a headline, "In the heartland, Oklahoma," which means to them Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, supply side is the yellow brick road. And supply side is our Laffer's argument that if you lower taxes, people will come to you.
Well, you know, when you look at what's happening and contrast us to what's happening in Washington, D.C., you know, it's pretty clear that, you know, if we're not going to be taking freedoms away from people, we're trying to expand freedoms in Oklahoma. And the best way to do that is allow people to keep more of their hard work and money. And we're continuing to move the needle. We've got to be competitive. Our forefathers saw it fit that the states would be competitive. In Oklahoma, we want to win.
And you feel competition from Kansas and Missouri?
Well, there's no question. When you've got the 13th largest economy in the world just south of you, in Texas, you've got to be competitive and always moving the needle. And frankly, you know, it's like my friend Will Weatherford, the Speaker of the House in Florida, said, we've got to be about creating pockets of freedom around the country. Because if you look at how the federal government has continued with its intrusion on personal liberties, it's going to be up to the states that are going to make the difference. If there's going to be reform in the country, it's going to happen in the 50 capitals around the states.
And Travis, Oklahoma was losing people for a while.
You see a change of fortune in the numbers based on
can even
part
show that
with
here,
Oklahoma right here. You could see that over time. They were bottoming out, losing people and income, and about 2005, that reversed. That's consistent with some of the tax cuts that they were passing in Oklahoma City at that time.
I'd also like to point out, John, that that didn't happen until I got elected also.
I love what the Speaker is doing because he understands Oklahoma does not have the beaches that Florida and California have. They don't have the huge universities that maybe you have in places like Boston and New York. A lot of the incumbency factors in other states that are helpful, they don't have. But they know that they can be competitive if they get labor and taxes right. And they're going to do it. And before you know it, Oklahoma is going to be in the top 5.
And Travis, you say celebrities are a good leading indicator?
Well, they are entrepreneurs, and we see evidence from people like Tiger Woods and others that make the move all the time.
He moved from
California to Florida, starting his career. NBA players like LeBron James and other players that end up moving to Texas get the first announcement on their doorstep that think of what you can buy with the money you save.
The Houston Rockets have pamphlets that remind players how many Rolex watches and Bentleys you could afford from the money you save in taxes, just moving to Texas?
That's right. And in many cases, these athletes have an opportunity to earn more after taxes, regardless of whether they play another game or not.
Michael Phelps doesn't live in Maryland anymore?
That's right. And Tony Romo is the best paid athlete after taxes, even though he might not have a gross pay equivalent to others in the NFL. You see this
because he lives in Texas, a no-income tax state.
Being a resident of Texas or a resident of a lower tax state means real value.
Speaker Shannon, you've lowered taxes several times, but why don't you go to zero like Texas and Florida do?
You know, we actually had a proposal on the table to do that last year. Because of some of the lobbying efforts, we weren't successful at it. But again, I think what's most important is that we keep moving the needle.
Wouldn't you have trouble running state government?
You know, well, certainly that argument could be made. Obviously, you've got to be able to keep a commitment to core government services. But, you know, there are a lot of states around the country that have proven that you can do it without a state income tax. It's the most regressive tax out there. And again, if you want people to, you know, to have investment dollars in your state, it's like my mentor, J.C. Watts, said, capital won't flow to a hostile environment. You've got to keep it as open and free market principled as you can. And in Oklahoma, we believe we're doing that.
Thank you, Speaker Shannon, Darcy Olsen, Travis Brown.